Get started. Welcome to the Finance and Audit Commission July 18th regular meeting. This is a hybrid meeting with the Finance and Audit Commission members, city staff, and members of the public participating in the downtown conference room and participating remotely. We'll first move to roll call. I would like to introduce staff and Finance and Audit Commission members present. Colin Albright, Lynn Bramlett, we're waiting for Jayanta, Jackson Garton, Jeff LaRoe, and Matt Normington cannot be here today. I myself, Carol Wong. Staff present include Administrative Services Director Brittany Mello, Assistant Administrative Services Director Jared Hansen, Interim Finance and Budget Manager Ronnie Singh, and Senior Ying's not here. Senior Accountant Ying Chen, hello Ying, and Manager Adrian Patino. Adrian, would you please provide instructions to the Finance and Audit Commission and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
All right. Thank you, Chair Wong and the members of the Finance and Audit Commission. Welcome everyone to the July 18th regular meeting of the Finance and Audit Commission, and thank you for attending. Staff will engage in webcams and microphones to make presentations and to respond to members of the Finance and Audit Commission. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment on an item on tonight's agenda, after the chair calls for public comment, you will, if for the item you wish to speak on, for virtual participants, you'll use the raised hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen or dial *9 if you're on a landline or cell phone. If you are in person, you'll complete a speaker card and return it to me. And that includes the instructions for this meeting, and I return it to the chair.
Thank you, Adrian. So a little more on public comment. Under public comment, the public may address the Finance and Audit Commission on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. Please clearly state your name and address or political jurisdiction in which you live. The commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the advisory body cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. Moving on to the next item, the consent calendar. Under the consent calendar, the Finance and Audit Commission may take action to approve routine business items in one motion unless a Finance and Audit Commission member, city staff member, or a member of the public requests that an item be discussed or continued to a later date. Adrian, do we have any public comment on the consent calendar?
All right. If you would like to comment on agenda item D1, approve agenda or all the items under the consent calendar, which is D1, approve the April 18th, 2024 Finance and Audit Commission regular meeting minutes. Please engage the raised hand feature at the bottom of your screen. Or if you're on a cell phone or landline, please press *9. If you're in person, please complete a speaker card and return it to me. And I'm seeing no requests for public comment at this time. You may continue.
All right, then moving on to agenda item D1, approve the April 18th, 2024 Finance and Audit Commission regular meeting minutes that are attached. Staff liaison Adrian, please state the motion.
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
Oh, the consent. Do I have a motion and a second to the stated motion?
I move.
Okay, any second?
Second.
Okay. All right. Then we can put it to a vote. Do we consent to the consent calendar? All in favor, aye? Aye. Great. I think now we're moving to agenda item D1.
E1.
E1. Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. Under regular business, the Finance and Audit Commission considers recommendations from the city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require Finance and Audit Commission approval. Our first regular business item is selection of chair and vice chair. To introduce this item, can I have management analyst Adrian Patino?
Okay. So thank you. Thank you, Chair, for the introduction. So our first regular business item is selection of the chair and the vice chair. We have a brief presentation. So on April 16th, the city council appointed two new members of the Finance and Audit Commission. We're here tonight, JJ and Colin. Welcome again. So the FAC is now comprised of the following 7 members who are listed here in alphabetical order. As part of the procedure for advisory bodies to the city council, the vice chair and the chair must be selected in May of each year by the members and will serve for 1 year or until their successor is selected. Commissions typically choose to rotate the vice chair to the chair, and then select the longest tenured commissioner to then become the vice chair. But it is up to the discretion of the commission how they would like to go about that process. The chair of each commission is responsible primarily for, running these meetings, and things like meeting with staff to help set the agenda. They often have the kind of like the first crack at doing the annual report out to city council if they desire to be the representative at that meeting. And when the chair is not present, the vice chair will assume the duties of the chair, so running the meetings and so forth. So with that, I open it to the commission for any questions about the duties of the chair or any other questions about the process. And then if we have none, then we can open for nominations and votes for chair and vice chair.
Okay, so just to be clear, so you've served your 1 year,
Mhm.
and so the normal process would be for you to rotate out and then for Matt to step in as chair.
Yes, that's my understanding.
That's normal process. And then the group of us would look around and say, who's been here the longest? And nominate them for vice chair. That's the process.
Yes. Yes, and even though Commissioner Norrington is not here tonight, he still can be rotated to chair, and whoever is selected vice chair can just run the remainder of this meeting.
Okay.
And for the commission's information, the longest tenured commissioner is actually you. You got here just a little bit earlier than Lynn did.
Isn't physical attendance to the first meeting or?
He was appointed in April
Okay.
and Lynn was appointed in May. So
Oh,
he's just
gotcha.
he was appointed just a little bit earlier.
Gotcha.
So then probably want to go with more experienced and knowledgeable vice chair.
Oh,
Go ahead.
no, you go ahead. I'm sorry. Should we start with the chair or?
Yeah, so the process then, so you are stepping down, and is that a choice, or, can we say you stay on for another year, or what are those options?
My term ends next April, so I cannot stay on for another year technically.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'd like to nominate Matt, although he's not here, to be the chair.
second,
Any other nominees? You also can self-nominate, just to.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Just to make that clear. Okay, so we have a nomination for Matt Normington for chair. We can put that nomination to a vote. So all in favor of making Matt Normington, we need to do chair. Yes,
thank you.
thank you for the reminder.
Yeah.
I also want to make sure Matt has agreed to this.
I thought of that.
I mean, we can presume he agrees until next meeting if he has views.
And as the chair, he could, as part of the agenda setting on the next meeting, re-agendize this item, should he not want
Yeah.
those responsibilities for some reason.
He doesn't have a 10-year issue that you're, the keys.
So Matt is also rolling off next April because we were appointed at the same time.
And so at that time, the commission could have the vice chair serve as the chair for the meeting in between, before
The next year process.
yeah, the next annual process could be an option.
Okay, public comment?
Yes, so if you would like to comment on agenda item E1, selection of chair and vice chair, please engage the raised hand feature at the bottom of your screen. If you are dialing in from a landline or from a cell phone, please press *9 now. And if you are in person, please complete a speaker card and return it to me. Seeing no requests for public comments. So we may continue with the nomination and voting process.
So, should we put it to a motion, the motion being to nominate Matt Normington as the next chair for the Finance and Audit Commission? Okay, I've stated the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Jeff seconds. All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye. All right.
And the motion passes. So for our nominations for vice chair, who would like to nominate someone or nominate themselves to
Like
become vice
to
chair?
meet Lynn Bramlett. We go out of the normal policy simply because she's far more knowledgeable than I will ever be and forgotten more about this stuff than I'll know. So she's led a subcommittee that, you know, working with Ron in terms of alternative revenue sources. And she demonstrated tremendous leadership. So I have a lot of faith in her. And if I realized that I was next up, I might have missed today.
We might have nominated you anyways.
Yes. But I'd like to meet.
Any other nominations for vice chair?
Then I will second Jeff's nomination.
All right, so we can take a vote.
Well, the motion is to nominate Lynn Bramlett as vice chair of the Finance and Audit Commission. Motion, do I have a second?
Oh, I can't say. Second.
JJ, all right, so all in favor? Right,
All right. So we now have a new chair, Commissioner Matt Normington, and a new vice chair, Lynn Bramlett. Congratulations to our new chair and vice chair.
great. I guess we can now move to our next regular business item, which is to review the city's investment policy. To introduce the item, we'll have Assistant Administrative Services Director, Jared Hansen.
So the investment policy provides guidelines for the investing in the city and the former Community Development Agency of Menlo Park in accordance with the state of California Government Code, section 601 through 606, 10, 6310, and 6360 through 6368. 6. A lot of different codes, as well as the investment into the lake fund under government code section 16429.1. The overall objectives of the investment policy are to ensure the safety, liquidity, and yield, as well as its relevance to current law and economic trends. And each year, the city investment advisor reviews the policy to ensure it's kept up to date with state laws and in compliance with our policy, and recommends changes to that policy to help maximize the yield while maintaining the safety and liquidity. And I have on the line Dave Woodhull. He's the Senior Portfolio Specialist from Insight Investments. And I will turn it over to him for a brief presentation on the investment policy.
Thank you, Jared. The policy is a conservative policy. We've taken an approach where we're focusing primarily on treasuries, agency securities. We have about a third of the portfolio, about 30% max in corporates. And on the corporate side, you're limited to A-rated or above for the corporate securities. The duration of the policy or the duration of the portfolio can't be beyond 5 years. And we're benchmarked generally against the 1 to 3 year Treasury index. So again, not a lot of changes in the policy this year. It's always been kept up to date according to the statutes in 53-601, as Jared talked about. And really there's no changes from this policy from the last year's policy. And with that, I'll turn it back to Jared.
One of the reasons the city needs to review the investment policy each year is because state statute requires that annually the city council delegate the responsibilities of the investment program to the chief financial officer or to the city's administrative service director or designee as the CFO or the treasurer. And that's one of the reasons why this is reviewed on an annual basis, so we can affirm that particular process. That's all I have on the investment policy. Open up for any clarifying questions from the commission.
I've got a question, Dave. So I know our policy specifies that it's supposed to be US Treasury of equal maturity is the benchmark, but how do you think about the benchmark since 30% is in corporate?
Well, I mean, the benchmark could get more aggressive. I mean, we could make the benchmark a little bit. We could use the 1 to 3 year Treasury and GovCorp, and the GovCorp will allow A or better. We put it for the A or better index. It'll allow for using corporates in there as well. Now, I will say that GovCorp index doesn't have quite the 30% allocation that we have in the portfolio. So it will still have some treasuries, some agencies, and corporates on top of that. One of the ways we do look at it and why the Treasury index is popular with a lot of cities and towns is that they're looking at it and say, well, what kind of value do we add over treasuries? If we were just doing treasuries, here's kind of the benchmark, here's like the bottom standard, and what sort of value add do we have by adding these corporates or adding these agencies into the portfolio, so that by using that treasury benchmark, that kind of gives you a way to gauge and see how much value you're getting by moving away from just a treasury only portfolio.
Okay, I mean, I think it's also a reflection of how much credit risk we're taking on. And so perhaps there's a way to benchmark our allocation separately, sort of a composite index where you've got, we're measuring our performance in corporates against an investment grade corporate index, so that, there's a little bit more there about how we can assess, I guess, the net financial benefit is described in our policy rather than simply data over the risk-free rate.
Sure. I mean, that's another way to do it. And you could do that by using, say, 70% of the Treasury index and then using 30% of a 1 to 3 year A or better corporate index and blend that. That's that would be more of a customized benchmark. We can certainly track that.
Thank you. I think that would be a constructive addition to the policy.
I would agree with that. The question, I mean, this is probably definitely a big question, is are the those allocations you mentioned, the duration level, et cetera, is that sort of an active decision on Dave on your end, or is that set by us? I think it's just trying to understand where the accountability hits at, just to follow on Colin's point.
So the maximum. The maximum duration is set by both by statute in 53-601 that limits your maximum duration 5 years. You can't have the maturity out over 5 years. Now, where we set a target duration that's our job. So we've got the duration of the index is about 1.8 years, 1.82, something like that. It moves around a little bit, 1.82, 1.83, 1.84. But now you'll see a little bit later, Our duration now is longer than that, and that's our job to set that duration. When interest rates were low and when they were rising, we had that duration lower than the index. Now we've got it a little bit higher because rates have been falling. We've reached the top of the interest rate cycle, we believe, and we wanted to extend that duration out a little bit. Now, there aren't any duration bands set within the policy itself.
Because that's great. I think it's great to have that actively managed.
Well, it's helped in performance, that's for darn sure. It helped a lot versus the index last year to be short in the start of the year and then to bring that duration on as interest rates are starting to top out. They've dropped a little slower than this year than we've anticipated. We thought maybe they would be starting to cut rates here in July. Probably not going to happen until September now, but we still have the duration a little bit longer.
And maybe I can add a little bit of context. So the city conducts the request for proposals to select an investment advisor through that competitive process. The contract with the investment advisor goes to city council for approval. So that's kind of one checkpoint in this process. And then the investment policy comes before the city council on the annual basis after it comes to the Finance and Audit Commission. So this group provides feedback, any suggested changes, and then makes those recommendations to the city council. They approve the policy as is or with changes, and then that's the guiding document that Dave uses for the rest of the year.
And just to give you a little background on Insight, because a lot of people haven't heard of Insight Investment, we're part of Bank of New York. We're their investment advisory division to the public sector part of Bank of New York, specializing primarily in fixed income securities. And we tend to favor a lot on the higher end. And that's kind of our niche marketplace, although we do have some high yield portfolios as well. But specializing primarily in fixed income, assets under management, just under $1 trillion right now. In our division, Bank of New York overall is about, I don't know, 2.5 trillion, something like that.
I'd like to add that, although I don't think it is a designated subcommittee, at some future point, if some of you wanted to work together on this topic, that could potentially be added. I think it was there. I'm not saying tonight it's not agendized, but you could keep that in mind. Is that correct?
We do have
Oh, it is
on the agenda a work plan review.
Right.
So at that agenda item, there's an opportunity to discuss that.
Okay.
To sort of provide a little bit of background, I think since I joined the FAC, the only topic that slightly touched on our investment policy was whether or not we wanted to add an ESG related benchmark. So that was one thing that we talked about, I think it was last year, but we haven't taken any further action on that item. Any other clarifying questions? Nope. All right, I think, Adrian, we can take this to public comment.
All right, if you would like to comment on agenda item E2, review of the city's investment policy, please engage the raised hand feature at the bottom of your screen. If you are dialing in from a cell phone or from a landline, please press *9 now. And if you are in person, please complete a speaker card and return it to me. Seeing no request for public comment at this time, you may continue.
Well, it says I should open it up for Finance and Audit Commission discussion. Anything else we'd like to collectively discuss on the investment policy? Great. Then I will pass on to Adrian to please state the motion.
All right. So motion to recommend the investment policy to the city council.
I will support that motion. Do I have a second to that? Okay, one seconding. All in favor? Right, this will go to city council. Okay, moving on to our next regular business item, which is to review the investment portfolio reports for June 30th and recommend receipt by city council. To introduce the item, can I have Assistant Administrative Services Director Jared Hansen?
You bet, thank you. Again, the cities and the successor agency funds are invested in full compliance with the city's investment policy and state law, which emphasize safety, liquidity, and yield. The investment policy requires a quarterly investment report to council, which includes the financial instruments of the city and provides information on investment type, value, and yield for all securities. Attached to that report is the summary of the investment portfolio, and it's 30-something pages of information. Just overall, the total treasuries, the total fair market value of the portfolio is $196,867,000. Approximately 3% of that is in delay for the local agency investment fund. The rest are in the managed portfolio or the securities portfolio, and those securities portfolio are what is attached. The return for GLAIF yielded approximately 4.48% for this past quarter, and for the securities portfolio, the rate of return yield was 3.65%. Total ESG ratings for the past quarter, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the best, is a slight change from 3.13 to 3.14, and a score of 3 being average. It's slightly below average on the ESG. The overall 2-year treasury note saw a yield of 2.27, which is about 1.41% lower than the city's portfolio performance. And based on the liquidity of the lake, as well as the city balances in the city's bank account, the city has sufficient funds to meet its expenditure requirements for the next 6 months.
Any clarifying questions from Finance and Audit Commission members? All right, Adrian. Oh, sorry, Dave.
I have a question. Oh, I'll wait till you start.
I was gonna let Dave jump in and.
Sure,
Oh,
I
sorry.
mean,
Yeah.
I've got a couple of slides we put together just to talk a little bit about what we're thinking right now, a little bit about the economic situation, why we have the portfolio structured the way it is, and a little bit more on the asset allocation of the portfolio. So with that, Adrian, if you can drop down to probably a slide or two to that first graph. That's the first one. Perfect. This graph kind of gives you an overall view of what's happening, economically. It's called the Economic Surprise Index. And so, and basically it says, what it's trying to do is say, the market has certain expectations of what's going to happen in the economy. And are the actual numbers a little better than the expectations, or are they a little worse? And right now, for the start of 2024, they were a little better than expectations. The economy was running a little bit hotter. It ended 2023, the last quarter of 2023, the GDP was running at 3.4%, which was hotter than anyone had expected. And it started off the year pretty good, but it actually started to slow down. And so we started to see this index running into that green area, which usually is positive, but for some reason on this graph, it's negative. So that the surprises were to the downside, and the economy started to slow down. We started to see that in the beginning of the spring, and the economy started to really slow down a little bit in the spring, not not tremendously, but it did start to slow down. In fact, GDP for the first quarter was listed at 1.6% growth. Now, just to put GDP into context, for the 10 years starting 2000, like ending 2019, 10 years before the pandemic, GDP averaged about 1.9% growth. So trend is considered to be GDP growth right around 2%. Well, as I said, it ended last year running at in the last quarter at 3.4%, and it averaged for the entire year last year at 2.5. So the economy is running pretty hot last year, but it has started to slow down a little bit this spring, starting off with the first quarter of 1.6% growth. Let's drop down to the next slide. Great. We had a great economy last year, running very hot. We had a pretty good employment numbers, but employment numbers have started to slow down too. And I know this is kind of a confusing graph. And what it's trying to show here is trying to show the unemployment rate across the horizontal axis and the number of job openings on the vertical axis. And the Fed chair kept talking last year that the employment situation is out of balance. We have too few people looking for jobs versus the number of job openings. And now, as this is showing just in May, but in June even, we have that number now, it's becoming more into balance, where you've got the number of job openings as a percentage of people looking for who are employed. And that's very similar. It's running around 4.5%, and unemployment as of June was running about 4.1%. So you see that's coming back into balance. The green dots on here, the light green dots versus the dark green dots, the light green dots are the most recent numbers for the last 2 years. And you can see the economy was out of balance in that there were a lot more job openings than there were people unemployed looking for those jobs. And now it's come back into balance. So they think that that is really helping. Part of it's helping the inflation situation. And it means that the economy is starting to slow down. There are fewer job openings, but that also means unemployment starting to rise. And like I said, last month, it rose up from the ultimate low of 50-year low a while ago of 3.4%. It's now at 4.1%. And as this economy continues to slow down, it's probably going to end up towards 4.5% towards the year end. Let's drop down another slide, Adrian. So why has the Fed been raising interest rates and trying to slow the economy down? Well, a lot of it is because the Fed has a dual mandate. One, they're trying to keep people employed, but they're also trying to keep prices reasonable, and inflation is a key part of that. So inflation was running so high 2 years ago, as we see in this graph back in 2022, that they had to do something to start to bring inflation down. And of course, raising interest rates slows the economy down. But it does it at a lag effect. It has a long effect. Sometimes it takes a year, it's taken a year and a half. In this case, it started to slow the economy down, but it's taken a very, very long time to slow that economy down. And these are two very important measures of inflation: core CPI, which is the consumer price index, and the one the Fed really looks at a lot, which is core PCE, which is the personal consumption expenditures. And they use that when they're gauging GDP, trying to take nominal GDP readings and making them real GDP readings by taking the inflation numbers out. So just to give you an idea, you saw through 2022 and 2023, inflation was coming down, and it was coming down at a pretty steady pace. But just this spring, because the economy was running so hot at the end of 2023, inflation started to pick up again. So that concerned the Fed. They're like, well, maybe we shouldn't start dropping interest rates because inflation's picking up again. Look, the economy's running really hot. We've got inflation coming back up. In the last 2 months, just recently, inflation started to again turn downward, and it's reversing course. And moving in the direction that the Federal Reserve wants it to move. And it seems like even a number of other indicators that we're looking at is showing that inflation really is moving towards the Fed's 2% target rate. And in fact, core PCE last month was running at 2.6%. So just over the Fed's target rate. That's on an annualized basis. So it's moving in the right direction and continues to drop about 0.1 to 0.2% per month. So it's coming down slowly in the direction, and that's what the Fed wants. It wants it to come down slowly, not dramatically, because employment's on the other side of that. They want to keep as many people employed as they can and keep the economy running reasonably hot. And our expectation this year is it's probably not going to be at the 2.5% rate for GDP that we saw last year, but probably somewhere between the 2% long-term average and that 2.5%. So again, all these things seem to be good. This is all happening. This is exactly what the Federal Reserve wants to happen. And so now they've now shifted their focus, and you've seen this in the last couple of meetings, away from speaking solely about inflation to starting to talk more about jobs. Now this is the concern, right? Inflation seems to be coming down and it seems to be under control and moving in the right direction. But now they're concerned that if they keep rates this high for too much longer, you're going to really start to affect, you see unemployment already coming up. How much higher is it going to go? They don't want it to go too much higher. 4.5% would probably be what their target goal is. And so now they have to start thinking about how do we back off and start to decrease the interest rates that we've had for so long so high. So our expectation and the market expectations are that there's a Federal Reserve meeting coming up at the end of this month, the 30th and 31st. Probably nothing's going to happen at that meeting. Some market participants think that, but that's probably not going to happen. What they are going to do at that meeting is start to signal. They're going to start to signal that the next meeting in September is going to be the meeting that they're going to start to drop interest rates. And they'll probably drop interest rates 25 basis points at that meeting, and probably one more time before the end of the year, probably at the December meeting. Unless, the economy really starts to deteriorate quickly, and then they might go into the November meeting as well. But our expectation is in 2025, you're probably going to see another 100 basis points in drop in interest rates as the Fed just starts to bring interest rates down in order to try and stimulate the economy and not let it roll into recession. As it starts to slow down, they want to get this soft landing. They want to bring it in just right around so that it's got GDP growth around 2%. They seem to be on target. Everyone made fun of them about having a soft landing 2 years ago, and they really seem to pull it off. It seems to be that they are getting inflation under control and the economy hasn't gone into recession. So they do seem to be doing a great job. So with that, let's go down and look at the portfolio real quick, because I know we're sort of running out of time a little bit. Here's the asset allocation. I talked about this a little bit earlier when we were talking about the policy, corporate bonds. By statute and by policy, you can't have more than 30% in corporates. Right now, we're running at around 28%, a little over 28%. So we might take that up to the 29% level. We try to run as many corporates in the portfolio because they add a little bit of extra return as we possibly can, but we're getting pretty close. And you see the duration on the far right side of those corporates is just over 2 years. Again, right now at this point, we were running a little bit long of the benchmark. We were running at 1.86 years. We've actually done a couple. This is as of the end of June. We've actually done some trades here in July, and we've got some more going on in August, and we're going to probably take that duration up a little bit more. It's running over the benchmark now, but we probably need to get it up, running more in that 2% area. And we've got a couple of we've got some agencies rolling off, and we've got some treasuries rolling off in the next month, and we're going to probably move that duration out a little bit further. We haven't been able to add, typically we would add more agencies to the portfolio. Right now, they're running at about a third of the portfolio at 30, just over 33%. But the agencies are pretty smart right now. I mean, they know that we're at the top of the interest rate cycle too. So they've been issuing, instead of been issuing non-callable securities, they're issuing callable securities, which we don't want to buy in the portfolio. So we don't want to buy securities that are going to get called away as soon as the interest rates start to drop. The other thing they're issuing is a lot of floating rate debt. Well, you have the same problem with floating rate debt. The bonds don't get called, but the interest return that you get moves down with an index. And so we don't want to do that. We're trying to lock in these interest rates now, not let them drift down, which is what we're going to see over the next couple of months as soon as the Fed starts to cut interest rates. So we're trying to avoid callables. Therefore, our agency position has been dropping. Also, spreads between treasuries and agencies have been very, very tight. So we have probably more treasuries this is under the government bond section. That's all treasuries, US treasuries, running at 38%. That's a high portion of the portfolio, higher than we usually have. We would usually have more like 20% allocation to treasuries, but right now we just can't get a lot of non-callable agency securities. So with that, let's drop down to the next maturity distribution. You can see we're trying to move a lot of the duration of this portfolio into the longer term assets. We can't go over 5 years by statute and by policies mirroring statute, but we need to fill in some of that 3 to 4 year space and a little bit more on the 4 to 5 space, and in order to try and move that duration out just a little bit longer to lock in these rates while we have them before they start to cut in September. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions that you might have about the portfolio. You've got a lot of the details there in the quarterly or monthly reports that we send out, but that's got more specific information in it.
I don't have a question about the portfolio, and I appreciate your presentation, and you clearly love your job. That
Oh,
brings,
thank
yeah, but I'm curious, what is in the city's bank account with US Bank? If I could just have the numbers. Maybe you've shown it to us before, do you know? If not, it's okay, but it says right here on E32, the balances in the city's bank account with US Bank. So I was curious, it led to me wondering what was in there roughly.
It's 190 million.
Okay, where do you see that? I guess this.
That's the investment portfolio's value.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's
so
not the,
separate.
that's not
Not
the
our
cash in the
checking
bank and the checking.
Yeah.
What's the checking account?
Yeah, what's in the checking? It could
Well,
just be a process.
Yeah, and our report, the 190 million, that's in your custodial account. That's at US Bank, and that's what's being held in a money market account at the custodian. That's just cash that gets accumulated. So these are interest-bearing securities, so their interest is coming in all the time. Next time we have a maturity, we'll sweep some of that out and put it into a term bond. But right now, it's invested in the money market account at US Bank on that portfolio. But you also have your operating accounts,
Yeah,
and I don't know that much about that.
You're checking the operating.
Yes, he doesn't have.
Yeah, he does. I need the portfolio. They have bank accounts.
The operating has 40 million in it right now.
Okay.
A few large deposits at the end of fiscal year.
It's on about 6 months worth of cash, right?
Yeah.
He's not.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the
And
leaf
that's-
is basically as liquid as cash. You can get it out very quickly.
And that has the, 6 million in there right now, I guess.
Can you explain the LAIF, by the way?
The LAIF is the local agency investment fund. It's established by the state treasurer's office, and any municipality can participate in that. That money is ours. It's not the state's money. They can't take that money from us. That is invested and pooled with all the other agencies. I think the total value of LAIF right now, if I remember, is upwards of $143 billion or something like that amongst all the agencies across the state. So we have a separate account with LAIF that gets pooled and then invested by the state treasurer to provide returns for us. So 21.97 billion is the total amount in LAIF currently.
How do we think about allocating to the LAIF versus with Dave?
LAIF generally has a little bit lower investment return rate than the investment portfolio does, simply because the LAIF is a little bit more of a conservative investment policy that's driven by the state and the state treasurer. I mean, their goal is to maintain maximum liquidity so we can withdraw those funds at any time. That's really their goal.
Is there like a relationship dynamic with the state, in terms of receiving grants or anything like that?
No. It has nothing to do with that. So it's just like another investment vehicle or investment account that we have, or another bank account that we have. Basically, it's just on file with the state treasurer's office instead. And if we withdraw any money from that, it's, we request the money from them, they transfer it over to us, and it's the wire transfer within 24 hours, less than 24 hours usually. We get it in the same day.
It's essentially what we call local government investment pool, which operates somewhat similar to a money market account, although they don't necessarily operate under the SEC Rule 2A7, which is what governs general money market accounts. It tends to be a lot longer, so it has like 190-day weighted average maturity. So operates as a pool, as Jared said. You put money in, it's collected with everyone else. They use it. They buy commercial paper with it. They have banking deposits and that sort of thing, as well as treasuries and agencies.
This is again probably a stupid question, but would there be an easy place to look for just so I can kind of understand our history, like a historical asset allocation, duration, benchmark, kind of the Collins question of like how the portfolio has just been managed, just to even understand that? Is that an easy thing for me to just click around somewhere online that I don't know, or which is totally most probable, but.
So we have our Finance and Audit Commission page on the city's website. And we bring the quarterly investment reports to the commission.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you click through the different meeting agendas, those reports would be there. They're also brought to the city council. So you could search on the city council page as well. But that would be kind of manually downloading and reviewing them, side by side.
Yeah. So we get this report quarterly as of quarter end, and if you wanted to see a trend analysis, you might have to build that yourself. Or Dave might be happy to provide us with something.
Sure.
And we don't know if we get Dave here for the quarterly reports. So please feel free to ask any questions. He is the expert.
No, I think the way you're thinking about the portfolio is terrific, honestly. I think it's very thoughtful and consistent with, I think it's great, yeah. And I like that you have the ability to move, duration around. I think to Colin's question, it's more of what are our decisions, i.e. sort of the base level kind of, benchmark, and then ultimately what are your decisions, and just trying to kind of, understand those, hold us accountable to things we need to be held accountable to, and so. But as far as your viewpoint of the world and what you're doing in the portfolio, I think that makes a ton of sense.
Great.
Any other clarifying questions? Adrian, I think we take this to public comment.
If you would like to comment on agenda item E3, review the investment portfolio reports for June 30th and recommend receipt by city council, please engage the raised hand feature at the bottom of your screen. If you are dialing in from a cell phone or from a landline, please press *9 now. And if you're in person, please complete a speaker card and return it to me. Final call for public comment, and seeing no request at this time, you may continue.
Thank you, Adrian. We can now open it up for Finance and Audit Commission discussion. Any other discussion points from us? Okay. If not, I will pass it to Adrian to please state the motion.
Right. Motion to recommend receipt of the investment portfolio reports for June 30th by the city council.
Anyone want to
Motion.
motion? Okay. Anyone want to second the
We're
motion?
seconding, we got these, that,
Or do you approve it being?
we're approving it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, it is being delivered to city council and
Right.
we reviewed it.
Yeah, I got it.
Yes. Anyone?
Sorry, I second.
Okay. JJ seconds. Alright. Great, all in favor? Aye. All right.
It's nice to be two investment professionals.
Yeah. Yes, this is wonderful, wonderful addition.
And it's just first time taking a look at this stuff, so.
Yeah, yeah. And we get a report every quarter, so you know, as you go on, if there are more questions, you want to see trends, changes. All right, moving on to our next regular business item, which is to review the draft Finance and Audit Commission annual report that is going to City Council. To introduce the item, could I invite
I do.
in? Oh.
I'm gonna sign off now. Maybe I can be with you guys in person sometime. I'd love to do that. I'd like to work it out to do Atherton and you guys at the same time. So, but it was a pleasure being with you by video.
Thanks for all the work.
My pleasure. Take care.
All right. Perfect. I would like to invite interim finance and budget manager Ronnie Singh to introduce the item.
Hello, thank you. So per the commission's committee's policies and procedures, roles and responsibilities, each commission is required to develop an annual plan, which we have. We have 13 items on our work plan, on your work plan, which becomes the foundation for the work performed by the advisory body in support of the city council annual work plan. A report out by a representative of the advisory body is required at a regular scheduled city council meeting at least annually. On September 26, 2023 is when the city council approved the work plan that we currently have. And the annual Finance and Audit Commission report out to the city council is scheduled for August 13th. So that's why staff has prepared a draft report out for discussion and approval in this meeting, as well as selecting a representative who will report out at the meeting. So once the report out is approved, staff will list the item on the city council agenda and distribute it with the agenda packet for the August 13th meeting. So we'll go through the draft that we have prepared, basically starting with the agenda as we have listed, financial and audit committee roles and priorities, reviewing the activities and plans, and then getting guidance from city council. And of course, listing all the commissioners that we have on board now. Good to see that all the positions are filled. So again, we haven't listed all of the 13 here because there are 3 that are kind of by default on everyone's, but we have listed the 10. I can go through each one if you want, or I think we're pretty familiar. Okay. So going on to next slide, and the activities that the commission has so far done. Including the subcommittee, looking on some of the focus areas. And then on to the next slide. Just looking forward to what the Financial and Audit Committee is planning, or commission is planning to do. And then seeking direction from council. So that concludes the presentation draft that we have, and back to the chair.
Thank you, Ronnie. Any clarifying questions?
I'm curious about the August 13th meetings. I thought they were taking a break.
That's the first meeting back from their break.
Oh, okay.
Who's that?
The council, sorry.
So what is our like responsibility or oversight with respect to the budget?
The budget is not brought to the Finance and Audit Commission. It's a city council process. So there's no formal responsibilities or work plan items related to the budget for the FAC.
But there is a budget workshop that happens and, you know, everybody is free to go, ask questions. We are definitely free to review the budget, and to the extent we have questions, come to city staff and ask them. But to Brittany's point, we're not responsible for producing it or reviewing it or providing advice on it.
When you open it up for comments, I have some comments.
Okay, I guess we can go to public comment first if there are no clarifying questions, and then we can open it up for discussion.
All right. If you would like to comment on agenda item E4, review the Finance and Audit Commission annual report out to City Council, please engage the raised hand feature at the bottom of your screen. If you are dialing in from a cell phone or from a landline, please press *9 now. And if you are in person, please complete a speaker card and return it to me. Final call for public comment on item E4. And seeing no hands or cards, you may continue.
Great, I will now open it up to discussion. Lynn, you mentioned you had a couple of comments.
Well, I would say I'm gonna talk about it. So I now often go to the city council meetings and I often attend the fire board meetings too, you know, just, and that can be a different perspective. I mean, in general, but I think it's true that there's general interest from the council in having the advisory commissions become more active. In fact, at the last meeting, they heard from the Environmental Quality Commission, and I heard that, and they are known for being a very active working commission. And it's been that way for a number of years. So, you know, they kind of had a focus originally on trees and that kept growing. And I think their staff liaison meets with the subcommittees too. But they were commended, I thought, from most of the council members, if not all, for really directly working to contribute toward city priorities, you know, in a focused way. And so, you know, that would be my personal aim here too. And so going to council, I know we have talked about more frequent meetings, and this commission did used to meet monthly, as I recall. I don't know when it changed to, because I tended right and up until the pandemic, I went consistently for about 2.5 years. And maybe subcommittee reports at each meeting, you know, kind of a way to, you know, get work done outside of the commission meetings and then report more frequently. So, and some of these other topics, you know, we don't review the budget, make staffing decisions or anything like that. But I think within the general idea, if it's a shared priority with the staff, working with the staff, you know, there's flexibility.
Thank you, Lynn. And I think we talked about just the question of frequency of meetings. Definitely could agendize that if there's a formal desire to convert these meetings from quarterly to monthly. So for the new back members, the staff can call special meetings. So to the extent there is an item that, you know, we want to collectively discuss that doesn't really make it in time for a regular meeting, we could call a special meeting. And Brittany, maybe I'll turn to you to talk a little bit about just special meetings and meeting frequencies, and maybe answer Lynn's question on when we change the frequency of the meetings.
Absolutely. So just point of clarification that the chair can call a special meeting independently, or a majority of the commission can call a special meeting. Generally, we have needed to hold several special meetings due to the timing of when things need to be brought to city council, and they must first be brought to the Finance and Audit Commission. So sometimes the quarterly meeting schedule doesn't perfectly align with the schedule for getting it onto the city council agenda. So it is generally, as the chair said, a timing issue. But I believe we've held maybe 2 to 3 special meetings a year, on top of the quarterly meetings.
Thank you, Brittany. Any other comments on the annual update that Ronnie presented?
Well, I have one more. It just seems kind of light on specifics. So a lot of this is, investment reports, they go forward. The budget, the process was pretty far along before, independently of our meetings, because we meet every 3 months, but like it does list the subcommittees, but, reasonable. If I were on the council dais, I might be wondering what specifically have these subcommittees done independently of kind of the bread and butter work of this commission. So at minimum, I think it would, and I appreciate you're putting it on the agenda tonight. It's toward the end of the meeting, and we have been working outside of the meeting. We look forward to talking about one set of ideas, but at minimum, kind of build that in a more frequent way, subcommittee reporting. Because I know I work to deadline. I don't know about the rest of you. But it's helpful to have that report.
So one feedback point, more detail to the report. And then I guess I'd like to open it up to see if there's a volunteer amongst us to actually present the annual update.
I'll do it. If no one else, if you can't do it and
I'm out
can't
of
do it, I'll do it. Let me check my calendar.
Yes, August 13th,
Okay.
probably pretty soon after the meeting starts. The presentations are at the front of the meeting, so 6:30.
I am going out of town, so I want to be sure. August 13th.
Yes.
I might be out of town.
Right.
I won't be available.
Well,
Looking like
The new ones.
Dominate the chair.
I might be back. I'm just not sure. We're taking a short trip. I can check, but I don't know right now, so I could be a possible backup.
I'm here. I would need some coaching, most likely as to what I would be saying. It feels like throwing me right in the fire, but if everyone's gone. I could say you're the last resort,
okay.
but I am at least in town, so.
Okay, that's good.
It'd be the number one qualification.
Matt might be here too.
Yeah, there's Matt and Jayanta as well. This isn't sort of a formal fact decision, right? Or do we need to somehow vote on this or make a decision?
No, we can nominate, then have a backup, that's JJ. With an alternative to, Deonta or Bat.
I'll know tonight, but
Oh, okay.
it's a possibility I might not, so it's better, to kind of firm that up. But thank you.
I'm not sure that you have to vote on this, but if so, I think we could take this as direction to
Okay.
reach out to now Chair Normington, see if he is available.
Yeah.
And then I would need clarification if Commissioner Day is second that I would go to, or JJ.
I think I would check with Matt, and if Matt's not available, JJ is definitely in.
I am down.
I can let you know when I get home.
Yeah.
I think I will be gone.
Okay, so Matt first, Lynn second.
And
then
this is-
JJ.
Volunteering, but
Yes.
I am delivering this message of sort of what we do, what we've done, what we do, and what we're going to do, essentially.
Mhm. In a brief presentation to the city council. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sure these previous presentations are recorded somewhere, right? So,
Get ideas.
I do think it has been a little bit since we did a report out.
I think
Because of
EQC has been
COVID.
the first one this year.
Yes,
I mean, going back to 2020, maybe we'll be able to see a report out from FAC, but
Guidelines as to the structure of how you make presentations on the city council. Simply got 3 minutes, it's in 4 slides, what.
so what we would hope to get this evening is either direct tweaks to the draft presentation or the general feedback that's been provided of adding more details on what the commission has accomplished over the past year, and then this would be the draft presented. Generally, I would say it's between, 3 to 5 minutes presenting and then open for questions. I think EQC is a agenda heavy commission. I think they went maybe 5 to 7 minutes, but.
yeah, so I think for reference, you could see what EQC did, and maybe we're going to be a little bit.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, if you're asking, the only thing I might add here, now that we've sort of decided, is noting on, because today's slide 1 or this when it's listing commissioners, the parentheticals on new is great. I would just put parentheticals on chair and vice chair, presumably we get there.
I agree with that, and I think maybe even a brief phrase about their background can be helpful. I know they read the applications, but people forget, and I think that's really helpful. And we, is the staff gonna come up with that, or, just enough to kind of, help them have some context for. Because, some of us they might know, but some of us they might not.
Yes, we can go back to the applications that were filed and pull a summary.
Or just like a phrase or a short.
That would probably be a short
Yes,
bullet
yeah.
point underneath the
Yeah,
name.
totally. Do you all like that idea?
That's great.
It helps them to get to know us too.
Yeah.
Okay,
And since we provided fairly general guidance tonight on just more details, would there be an opportunity for us to all see the report again before the report out?
We, as staff, can always provide the commission information in between meetings. As long as the commission does not reply to one another, in fear of violating the Brown Act.
Mhm.
So, we could provide that draft. You could take a look and provide us independently, staff, any
Mhm.
additional
Mhm.
tweaks that would be needed, but we wouldn't be able to take any group feedback.
Yeah.
Can you expand on the Brown Act?
Yes, the Brown Act is for transparency. It dictates how public meetings are agendized and run, and the voting and the procedures that we've demonstrated this evening with public comment. For instance, you can't discuss an item not on the agenda, because the point is the agenda gets published at least 72 hours in advance. The public can review and they decide, is this an agenda I want to be present for or listen to or comment on? That's really a big one. And so the provision I was talking about is whenever a majority of the commission comments on something outside of a meeting, it becomes a meeting. And then you're in violation of the Brown Act, which does have legal, yes, implications.
So our subcommittees and basically discussions we might have outside of these meetings, then it's what, a minority of the commission?
It needs to be, yeah, so we have 7, it needs to be 3 members or less. And so when the subcommittees meet, that's perfectly fine, but another person couldn't jump on and you couldn't. None of the subcommittee members could then go to another commission member to ask their opinion on the subcommittee item. Because that would then bring the 4th member in. So you would wait to bring the subcommittee report out to update the full commission and get any feedback.
That's helpful.
And there is a training, a very long training for new commission members. So if you haven't been invited to one, I encourage you to contact.
I think it
Our
was
clerk,
Judy.
yes, Judy, our
Aaron
city.
is our city clerk, and she would be more than happy to provide a PowerPoint summary or a video recording of the Brown Act training. I'll mention on social media, that could also become an issue, or in this city's case, we have our CCIN, our city council network, where you can, if people are responding via email to one another, that counts as a meeting if we get more than the majority. So it's a very strict rule.
So it sounds like staff can share a draft with us. We could independently provide feedback. And I think if either Matt or JJ sort of is presenting, then whoever is presenting should have a final say on the draft. So if we're all good with that, we'll just, yeah. Sounds good.
And if we're in town, it's helpful to show up, I think, to show solidarity, possible at the presentation, if you can. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no. worries. Like, I can't-
Flounder too up there. They'll ask you some question about the Brown Act and I won't be able to answer.
He just looked at Judy. Any other comments or questions on the annual report? Nope. All right, sounds good. So I'm just trying to think through, Adrian, how we should motion this, given we're not approving this report as presented tonight.
I think you could include in the motion as modified by the
Okay,
discussion points this evening.
that sounds good. So Adrian, please state the motion.
All right, so motion to take the Finance and Audit Commission annual report with the modifications of adding background on the commission members, adding chair and vice chair to the commission member listing, and including more detail on the FAC's past activities. And I'll pause there just to give the commissioner an opportunity to correct me on any of the direction that you've given.
Oh, I think that's what we discussed. So do I have a motion?
Second.
Then second, so I'll put this to a vote, all in favor? Aye. All right, our last regular business item is to review the Finance and Audit Commission work plan, consider subcommittees and recommend a 2024 to 25 work plan to the city council. To introduce this item, could I invite Administrative Services Director Brittany Mello?
Certainly. So with the 2 new commissioners joining, we wanted to give the FAC the opportunity to review the work plan, ensure everyone's on the same page, and then the opportunity to establish additional subcommittees to address some of those work plan items, or to add the new members to existing subcommittees. So I think we can, where perhaps Adrian Patina would like to add more.
Yes, so a little bit of background on the work plans. They're approved annually by the city council no later than September 30th of each year. The current work plan that we have was approved by the city council at their September 26th, 2023 meeting. And on October 19th of 2023, the FAC voted to form 3 subcommittees to support specific work plan items, which are 7, 8, and 13. So this is the approved work plan. All of the items that have an asterisk denote a subcommittee supporting them. So those are work plan goal number 7, identify potential financial benchmarks, identify potential alternative revenue sources, number 8. Number 9, open gov transparency portal improvements in community training. And lastly, number 13, research opportunities to pay down successor agency debt. As part of this item tonight, staff is giving the commission the opportunity to review the proposed work plan, which continues forward the same work plan goals, as well as Brittany mentioned the opportunity to review the current subcommittees and propose any new either appointments to these subcommittees. Once again, reminding that no subcommittee can contain more than 3 members, or forming new ones to support any of the approved work plans.
And maybe a mention that the successor agency debt subcommittee had 2 of the members who finished their terms at the last meeting. And so and they had provided a report to the full commission once previously.
Thank you, Brittany and Adrian. So any clarifying questions from Finance and Audit Commission?
So the financial benchmarks, the original idea there was as a newbie to sort of oversight type with government generally, but in particular, I was curious, how does our spending rank relative to other cities? How efficient is the city of Menlo Park relative to other cities? And so I think my second or third meeting, I had run a bunch of benchmarks analysis with other like cities and found that, based on the analysis that I'd done, it was reasonably well managed in terms of, population base, high worth, California, all those, variables that I plugged in. I don't know that I actually submitted the report. I think we just talked about it, but that was the concept of the financial benchmarks. There's a lot of good documentation. Lynn has been very good at providing a lot of stuff on, best practices for, managing or benchmarking the financial performance of a city, et cetera. And, I think we sent the email, somebody sent an email about there being a spending problem versus a revenue problem. And nobody responded. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what there was, but.
A public, not someone here. So,
Right.
Yeah, I remember I was on the other guy, she was, what do we do with this?
Okay, so that's what I was looking to get. So what I can do is I can go back, I can look at that, I can revise it. Because there was actually some good feedback about additional cities that should be included in that benchmark. It was basically I did it by total residents and coastal cities, certain income restrictions in terms of, you don't want to compare with, somewhere, in lower, California or something. And as it turned out, on a cost per resident basis, we were actually reasonably efficient, or at least on par with a lot of the other cities that I was trying to benchmark against. So is it okay if I actually go back, I'll look at that again, I'll see the notes as to the additional cities that people had suggested, and do I submit that formally to the commission, or what do I do with that?
Well, I think now we had someone else on that committee with us who's now turned out, but I'm
Right.
still on that committee with.
Oh, okay, because I was like, actually,
Yeah, so-
Lynn was on that.
Yeah, I have some ideas too. I
Okay.
think we have our next meeting and some kind of a report later as a deliverable and an update. I think would
Gotcha.
be perfect.
Okay. Sorry,
No,
I was just a little lost there when I saw it. I was like, why am I the only one? But,
yeah, I should be on that financial
On
benchmark
the top one, oh, we'll make that correction.
Okay,
I think they had Susan on.
yeah.
yeah, anyway, so that, the financial benchmark is a little bit.
Thank you for, because I was gonna ask what actually then, so.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I think that's hugely valuable and
Yes.
presumably would be something that when I think of the charter, particularly why, I wanted to get involved here, it's things like that. It's sort of just to assess, as you said, how good we are, sort of think about that and just shouting it on the, it's not, there's no gotchas, it's just a, and
No, absolutely.
Are you volunteering then to join with us?
I don't, I don't know, or it's up to 3, you're saying?
At
Yes.
most.
At most, yeah. I don't know if I want to be like, if it's 3, it could be 2, but I'm happy to join or happy not, just to second the desire to bring something like that, forward. Yeah, the question I think I was gonna also ask, say maybe then you and I talked about this, there might have historically been an investment subcommittee or something. Again, I don't know if that's true or not. So I was maybe gonna ask that and, certainly given at least my background interest, like, I would love to do something like that. Colin, sounds like maybe you would, have a similar sort of experience, but, just as again, that's it. Most of my questions to Dave and sort of otherwise on reporting is more of just kind of tracking that, being kind of, assessing benchmarks, things like that. So, those would be the 2 things that I at least would feel passionate about and or have some sort of background. The other ones, I feel like I'd be playing a lot more catch up. It's helpful.
So might be helpful if I really quickly just go through our 4 subcommittees and kind of what their purpose is and why they were formed. And then just a quick response to, I think Lynn had a comment on whether there was an investment subcommittee. So I think we did, I don't know when this was, but we did previously form a subcommittee to review the investment policy. So there had been that subcommittee. And we previously also had a subcommittee to review the pension, the city's pension liability. So those were 2 subcommittees that previously existed that don't exist anymore. And the FAC is definitely free to form new subcommittees. I think as long as, the objectives are in line with our approved work plan. Yeah, so that's that.
And I'll also add
Yeah.
that I included pension analysis in the financial performance benchmarks and, relative to other cities, did we have unsecured obligations for pensions and other things like that. And actually, as a non-investment professional, I was relatively impressed with what I thought was the structure and the approach to it. But anyway, I'll leave that to the experts.
No.
All right, so I think Jeff gave a really good intro to the financial benchmark subcommittee. And then the alternative revenue sources subcommittee, Lynn and Jeff are actually going to do a report out as a later agenda item. But the goal there was really to, consider other sources of revenue for the city. And then open.
Non-tax.
Yes.
So instead of raising taxes, innovative ways that a city or municipality could raise funds without actually increasing the tax rate.
And then the third one, OpenGov Transparency Portal, is something that Matt and I started working on when we joined the FAC. And so OpenGov is a platform. It's on our website. You can go in, you can sort of slice and dice financial information. We've just received feedback that it's not really that user friendly. Residents who don't have a strong finance background can't really go in and figure out what the information is, how to extract information. So it really was an initiative to think of ways to make it more user friendly and also to kind of increased interest in OpenGov and the information and financial information there. So that's that subcommittee. And Matt and I did a readout, I believe, a couple of months ago, and we will come out with some follow-up actions from our subcommittee. And then the last one where we have no current members on, this, and I might need staff to help me a little bit, but this item actually came out as a city council request to the FAC. They wanted us to figure out how to pay down the successor agency debt. So Susanna and Susan were the members who were previously on the subcommittee, and they did do a readout. And sort of the conclusion for that readout really is we need to go back to city council to figure out what exactly they want us to do on this item. Because, and Jared, you can probably give us some background on why we have the successor agency debt, the amount, but it's being paid down. And so we're trying to get more insight from city council on, do they want us to figure out how to pay it off more quickly, to extend it, to actually find funds to pay it down? That was the nature of the questions.
May I add a comment? So I watched the meeting where that plan came forward, and Mayor Taylor made a quote friendly amendment to add it, and there were no details, so if someone wanted to know more, and they didn't disagree. I know Maria Dora is our liaison, but I would think Mayor Taylor might have some more insight. Yeah, and so the subcommittee working on that, that's where I would start. Or at least include in whatever you're doing.
Thank you, Lynn.
And I can get back on that if you'd like me to.
Yeah, maybe
You
some
want me
quick
to-
background just for
No?
the new
Sure.
members. Yeah.
So the successor agency came as a result of the 2012 changes to the state constitution, which ruled that the redevelopment agencies could no longer function, and they had to be disbanded as of February 1st, I think February 1st, 2012. That was upheld by the Supreme Court. And as a result, all successor agency, or excuse me, all redevelopment agency activity in the state of California ceased. What the redevelopment agencies originally did is they would go to an area that was considered blighted or underperforming. And as the city invested money to reform or reestablish or redevelop that area, the incremental increase in the tax revenue from what it was before the city went into what it is after amount, that incremental tax revenue amount became revenue for that for that redevelopment agency. When they eliminated the redevelopment agencies, they said we can no longer do that. We can no longer get that incremental tax. But the prior redevelopment areas that exist in the city still have that incremental tax added on top of, or it's not really on top of, but it's the incremental tax from what it was before to what it is now. And that amount still goes to pay for the redevelopment agency's debt, or the successor agency. The city opted to become the successor agency to the Menlo Park Community Development Agency, whatever that was. Anyway, the redevelopment agency had one bond issue. That bond issue, I think it's 2031, that bond issue is going to be paid off in full. Let me just grab that number really quickly. And the total dollar amount left on that is $7. That's what I know, the page it's on, it's not just
It's
something.
less than 5 million. Thinking.
Oh, this is the wrong one. Well, no. Yeah, not that number. It might be less than 5, I don't know. This. 23, here we go. This. 77.
It's not an insignificant number, but it wasn't. It's really large.
When the debt is all paid off, what happens to that money that was going to pay the debt?
Yeah, so there's 30, as of 2023, there was $31 million left.
There's
$31 million left to pay off. Total with the premiums, 36 million. But that's all going to be paid for by that redevelopment incremental tax. Once the bonds are paid off, that incremental tax no longer goes to the redevelopment agency, it goes to the city of Menlo Park. Because that tax rate does not change, it's just what portion goes to the city versus what portion goes to the redevelopment agency to pay off the bonds. Right now, it's dedicated and specific for the redevelopment agency, sorry, the successor agency. Gotta be clear about what agency we're talking about. Right now, it goes to the successor agency. Once that successor agency debt is paid off, that additional incremental tax will return to the city as regular property tax.
Just to clarify, so they're still receiving some kind of step up in tax, even though the state government said that wasn't allowed?
It's not a step up in tax because it's whatever so it's, as properties are bought and sold, there's a difference in the tax of what it was originally versus what it is when they resell or when they. Because you can't increase the tax above the Prop 2A and whatever, all those, there's like 5 of them. But that incremental tax difference, or that difference between what it was when the city purchased the property and then resold it at whatever the new rate was, that incremental value is what's going into the taxes there. That incremental value is going to be there regardless of whether the city owns it or whether somebody else does it, because you sell that same property now, it's going to just transfer over and say, oh, well, it's still the same incremental value. If that amount will change.
So the redevelopment agency acquired land and the city taxed it. And now the city has an obligation to the redevelopment agency?
So we acquired the land, we redeveloped it, we refurbished it, we got it ready, and then we sold that land to somebody else. That incremental difference in the tax from what it was when we bought it to when we sold it, that's the amount that's going to the successor agency. That amount, once the debt is all paid off, will come back to the city. It's just which bucket it's going in right now.
So redevelopment provided cities with tools to lure developers, to help invest in the community. It was an economic development tool in areas that were blighted, was the technical term. So that those financial tools are no longer available to the city to help incentivize a developer to take on a blighted area.
And I'm pretty sure all the property, we're talking about District 1. Totally, though they could have developed outside of it. I believe this,
It's not all District
not all
1,
District 1, okay.
but mostly it is the area pretty much east and north of the Middlefield Road.
Mhm.
Middlefield Road over to Highway 101 and north.
But I
Pretty
don't
much
think
where
there
it
any
is.
property in there that we developed, but I could be wrong.
There are some
There
around
is some,
the
okay.
Veterans
Okay,
Hospital Center area
Okay.
that are considered in the redevelopment area as well.
okay.
And those I don't believe are in District 1. I think they're in
Yeah, it's.
3.
3. I don't.
Yeah, you work your way from the Bayfront. Yeah.
I'm like, I know it goes this way, and I'm like, Aldeville Haven is definitely included in that area north of the 101. And then there's the portion that's down through Willow Road and down through, I want to say through Middlefield, but it might be a little bit.
Susanna Hill had a lot of knowledge about this. It's a shame that she's gone. So I didn't fully understand. It seemed like some sort of bookkeeping thing going on. But yeah, I don't know enough about it, so I'm not going to comment, but interesting area. It's a shame that loss is out. So
Yeah, it's,
she had some strong.
Yeah, so it's District 1 and most of District 2, I believe, is included as well. Maybe part of District 3.
It hits a little bit on 3.
But I know all of District 1, District 2, and then I think portion of 3, because 3 includes some Middlefield Road over.
Well, I have to say, I've seen the original lines, to be upfront, because I've been interested in this topic. But to my knowledge, and maybe I'm wrong, although the city could have redeveloped property outside of District 1, the only development where they bought property, as you described, and then sold it was in District 1. So that's my understanding. So this tax increment financing method of paying is coming as I understand it, strictly from properties residing in District 1. That's not correct?
You know,
Okay.
it's anything that was in that entire area that's been bought and sold regardless of whether we bought or sold that property. So if an
Interesting.
individual came in and bought a property in the redevelopment area, that incremental financing increase or incremental costs of tax still contributes to the redevelopment agency as well.
I did not know that. Thank you.
Thanks for that introduction, Jared.
It was a lengthy introduction.
No, very helpful one as we try to figure out what this subcommittee should do.
And Carol, just to read back what you're saying, we need more direction from city council to know what we're supposed to do.
Yes, because there really wasn't very clear direction on, as Jared mentioned, the tax just pays down the debt, so everything is working. It really is. Are we trying to achieve something different here? And that direction wasn't very clear from city council, who really just told us to have a look at it, so. So those are the 4 current subcommittees. I think this is a good opportunity if JJ and Colin, you guys are ready to maybe volunteer for one of these. Jayanta's not here today and he isn't on any of them either, so I don't want to nominate him without him being present, but do you?
The financial benchmarks one sounds.
Okay.
I'll volunteer for the successor agency.
Okay. Yeah.
That piqued your interest.
Yes.
Great. Any? Lynn, Jeff, I know you guys may already be a little bit stretched, but are there any other subcommittees you want to jump on? No.
An interest in investments.
And we can form a new one. Is that something we can do?
This is again, gonna be such a stupid question, but if I were sitting here and saying, okay, yeah, you saw me ask a couple of questions about historical allocations, this, and one of the challenges when I was reading through the report is hard to benchmark actually what's happening. How would I go about recommending changes or work, like, is that a subcommittee or? I just don't, I mean, that's a silly question, I just don't know, or like, if Colin or like, if we sat here, like, what are things we'd wanna see on this thing to sort of report out, duration versus, maybe we change this benchmark, maybe we have this, ask them to. I don't know how long we've worked with David's team, but the last 5 years, returns and changes in allocation, whatever it is a part of it. How would that work? Or what would? And making sure I don't violate the Brown Act as well.
And I'm not an investment expert, and so I'm not sure if what you were just saying was that you would be interested in providing direction on the actual investment process. And that would be outside of your purview as a Finance and Audit Commission member, right? Dave, with Insight Investments is the approved firm for guiding our investments per city council. So I think where this commission comes in is reviewing that investment policy as we did, that's brought back once a year. And so the subcommittee could dive in more to the parameters included in that investment policy. I think that would be a potential subcommittee. Is that kind of?
Yeah, it's definitely not like, should we question what he's doing or anything like that? It's as one example, when one of our scopes is review the quarterly performance of the investment portfolio. I would say that there's some in there, but that there was information that I would find more helpful to contextualize some of that information. And so some of that's historical, some of that's comparison to benchmark, choosing a benchmark, the right one, et cetera. And so it's more of assessing, I guess, that report as opposed to any of the changes of some of the policy. Does that-
So under,
To me, to review the quarterly performance of the investment portfolio. Again, for me personally, there might be 3 or 4 things that I might say, I think we should look at X, Y, and Z. Reasonable people can disagree on that, or I just don't even know how I would go about making said recommendations to that. If that, does that help clarify kind of what?
Yeah, so, and Brittany, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if it's information needs, so you need more information from Dave. You want a trend analysis from him, you want him to package information differently when he presents it to us. I think that is something we can go to staff and staff can talk to Dave and, I mean, Dave is a vendor for us, so I'm sure he would be open to ideas on.
The things I'd be asking would not. He would,
Yeah, so,
he knows them for sure.
yeah, so I don't think we need a subcommittee to do that if it's really just asking Dave for more information on things. But what Brittany mentioned is, we could possibly form a subcommittee to make changes to our investment policy if for some reason we think the policy is prohibiting us from getting the performance we might want to look into. So that seems more like a subcommittee than, just getting more information from you. So that's
all. So,
Yeah.
so after the meeting, I could just like write you an email saying these would be the things that'd be great to see in the next quarterly report.
I think if is anyone else interested in reviewing that with you, then a subcommittee, a short-term subcommittee, right, could be formed this evening that maybe only lasts a quarter. The 2 of you have a chance to meet, or 3, to discuss what changes you might like to see in the quarterly reports, which maybe would be done on Dave's end or on staff's end when we write the staff report that goes with the quarterly reports. That could be an option. If no one else is interested in participating in that, then I think an email to our staff liaison would be just fine, and then we'd move forward.
Yeah.
I'd be interested as well.
Okay,
Great.
that sounds good. So I guess we need to propose a new subcommittee, and we can name it the investment review subcommittee.
Temporary investment.
Yeah. But before we go to new subcommittees, I just want to make sure our current subcommittees are well resourced. Just to summarize, for financial benchmarks, we have Jeff and Lynn. Alternative revenue sources, we still have Jeff and Lynn. OpenGov, me and Matt. Successor agency debt, Colin is.
I was gonna join financial
Right.
benchmarks.
Right. he's
Oh, okay,
joining us.
As long as that, again,
Okay.
with 3, I think.
So we have
yeah.
3 on financial benchmarks, and we only have 1 on successor agency debt, is that correct? Oh, then I will join that one. Yes,
Some of our missing people might join
yes,
too.
that is true.
So can I just make a different comment?
Sure.
This is something I struggled with when I first started. It was very gung ho stuff. And what I've come to realize, and the staff here have been very great and helpful and engaging and, but the commission itself, I'm always struggling with what does it actually do? And I realized we're a toothless watchdog. So we can bark, right? And we can bark a little more and get a couple people involved and do something focused with a work plan subcommittee is how I view it. So we can come up with something a little more formalized for the committee that the city council then actually has to review. So like alternative revenue sources in terms of not raising taxes, what are, other creative ways to do that? Well, that's one mechanism to do it. So it was a real struggle for me the first few months to sort of till that really set in. And I don't mean that in a negative way. You guys have been very good and really appreciated the responsiveness and everything else. But the commission itself is described as a toothless watchdog. And we can make it a little bit more formal in the approach with the subcommittees. So just an aside.
No, very, honestly, very helpful. And should I read that back in a sense of, let's not waste a bullet on an investment subcommittee?
No, actually, I think.
Which is totally fine.
Oh, no.
I don't take offense at it at all, because I think that it's a very apt description.
Yeah, so the subcommittee can actually come up with hard recommendations, and now it becomes transparent, and this is open, and this is what the commission has recommended. And so it will have some political sway at the end of the day. So I think it is valuable.
And JJ, I mean, we can sort of have a phase one of just understanding what's going on, and then the phase two could be actual recommendations or things that you both want to see actioned, and we can definitely kind of move to that. And Brittany, I believe it's okay if Colin and JJ form a subcommittee, they could directly talk to Dave, right?
No, their questions would come to
Okay.
us, if we need to schedule a meeting where we all meet, we could potentially do that.
So city staff just needs to be involved in any of those. all of
Yes,
those
since that's
things.
a contractor.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And if I may, I just
Sure.
wanted to also mention that annually we take the recommended work plan to city council. So this has all been working on our current work plan. The New Year's work plan will go to the city council on September 24th. So because our next quarterly meeting is not until October
Mhm.
17th, we will need a special meeting to review the work plan and see if there's any new topics or topics you want to remove because you've addressed them over the past year. And that's another opportunity for subcommittees, although we would generally, it's the draft work plan that's getting recommended to the city council. They will approve as is or modify as they did last time. And then an additional opportunity for subcommittees would come at that next meeting. So this isn't your only bite at the apple too, if you want to get settled.
And the Brown Act is a real pain in the ass. And it's not from them, it's from the state, right? But it's a real pain in the ass. It's absolutely an anchor tight. You're like trying to get something done or to interact or whatever. And the way to deal with that is the subcommittee. Then you can go off and do your own thing and not worry about it. So just again, haven't seen all that.
Yeah, this is on the work plan goal here, there's 13. This point on like researching opportunity, do we need to? That feels specific in terms of that we know what we're supposed to do.
Which one? I'm sorry.
13th, research opportunities to pay down successor agency debt. I'm just reacting to Carol's comment. We aren't sure exactly what we were supposed to do quickly down, you know, so do we need to broaden that out, I guess?
We could add some qualifiers, but I think that generally summarizes what the ask is figure out how to pay it off.
That was the statement.
Yeah.
And what the city council approved.
Got it.
And just responding to Jeff's point there on a toothless watchdog. Being a watchdog is part of our responsibility. You know, we do need to make sure, you know, audit looks good, our investment performance is decent. So that is part of our remit as well. Right, so
The barking solves 90% of the problem.
Yeah. That is very true. All right, any other points as we kind of talk through subcommittees? If not, we can probably.
Can we schedule a report at every one of these meetings? I mean, even if it's brief, I think that kind of a rotating basis, I don't mean from every group, but I think that gets us in the habit of, you know, doing the work.
Yeah, no, we definitely can, and I do want to make sure the frequency of these meetings aren't hindering progress. If we do need to set up a special meeting, I'm more than happy as long as we have something to talk about.
Yes.
That's all right. Did we form a Dirk, what are we using? Like, let's do temporary investment reporting.
I just need a motion and then we can.
Okay.
Yeah, so Adrian, I'm looking for you on a bit of advice here, but I guess there's two motions. The first one really is to summarize the list of new members added to the subcommittees, and the second one is to form the new investment subcommittee. Is that how you're thinking about it?
Yes, so we can have one motion to create the investment report subcommittee, appoint the members to that one, and then we can have the additional appointments to the existing subcommittees as another motion. So I can start with motion to approve, motion to create the investment report subcommittee consisting of Commissioners Colin Albright and JJ.
Second. Right, all in favor?
Right, and then our next motion. So motion to appoint to the financial benchmarks subcommittee, JJ, to join Commissioners Lynn Bramlett and Jeff LaRue, and motion to appoint Commissioners Colin Albright and Carol Wong to the successor agency debt subcommission. Or subcommittee, sorry.
Motion?
I second.
No, you do it.
Oh, all in favor? Aye. Great. I think that concludes that item, and Adrian, I don't think we called public comment on it.
So if you would like to comment on agenda item E5, review the Finance and Audit Commission work plan, consider subcommittees and recommend 24-25 work plan to City Council. Please engage the raised hand feature at the bottom of your screen. If you are dialing in a cell phone or a landline, please press star 9 now. And if you are present, please complete a speaker card and return it to me. Final call for public comment on agenda item E5. And I'm seeing no hands or cards.
Thank you, Adrian. We can now move to agenda item F, which is commissioner reports. I know that Jeff and Lynn have a report out from the Alternative Revenue Sources Subcommittee.
Can you just let me know the times? I have my watch at home and I'm 7:20. Okay. So Jeff and I have been meeting, we met again recently, and we've taken the angle. He's kind of working on one aspect, I'm working on the other mainly, then we talk about our ideas. So I have something for each of you. And we're not going to go over it in detail, but let me first get a copy in everyone's hand. I have enough for everyone. Oh, yeah. Does Brittany need one? Here you go. Oh, okay. Thank you so much. So Jeff will present, we've talked about his aspect about the new sources of revenue. We also took the focus of a dollar saved is a dollar earned, basically. And so these are ideas pertaining to saving money or staff time. And I'll go through it and give a high level, and then what we would love to have is some, we can't do everything here, and some of it would involve the staff. But kind of go through this and then see what would be most helpful. So the first is the vendor payments. So this, in short, the city's checkbook used to be at the website. And I don't know when it's stopping there, and it wasn't easy to find necessarily, but one could go there and, kind of see the payments. And I knew about that partly through attending the Finance and Audit Commission meetings. And then I became the leader of a volunteer-based group. And in that role, I would also go to the fire board meetings. And so, in short, we were paying somebody in the fire district for services we weren't getting. And this was a subject of much discussion. But I was in a position to connect the dots. So I saw the payments and I knew the contract was lapsed. And that got, I hope the payments are not going out. The person now is working in another, left the state basically. But we were paying $50K a year for services we weren't getting. And there's been a lot of documentation about it, and I have more background I could provide. But I have a screenshot of a date. So I saved one of these at home. I didn't save them all. And then on the next page, I've circled the payment. And first, I asked that these can go back to being posted there. I think it's a very important part of transparency. And I think it's possible there could be other payments like that going out, kind of auto pay with, no one's really checking, is the contract still there, et cetera. And on a related note, the civil grand jury for San Mateo County, within the past few days, they issued one of their 2023-24 reports that talked about internal controls. And the recommendations included Menlo Park. And I have a reference at the end of some sources I looked at. And so anyone could go and just Google it and get the report. So I'd like to see those back there on the website. The fire board sees theirs every 2 months, and they had a management audit that recommended they get them monthly. And I mean, even if the governing body doesn't look at them or comment, it allows the public to ask questions. And so this would, somebody would have to put them there, but they used to be there, and now the link is not live. And then the subcommittee could review 4 months of the reports and just kind of on the surface, what we know, what we can find out without contacting any vendors, come up with a short list and then have a discussion with the staff. In no way am I suggesting we would take any kind of independent action. So that's idea number one.
And the concept is in terms of principles for transparency.
Yes.
Crowdsourcing, people being able to look at stuff and be able to surface it.
Yeah.
Et cetera. And then ultimately the ability for everybody to know that that's open and accessible and has a big light shone on it. So.
And there could be payments, there could be other payments like that. So I'm not in any way, I'm just, it would be good. It is also supposed to be part of, at the city's open government portal, it states the intent to follow the Ballotpedia recommendations for transparency, and vendor payments is one of them. So it's stated there, the name is there, but the link is not live. So that's one of the ideas. So I'll move on to the second. The city's community grants funding program. So, and I have a staff report reference back there. So disclaimer, I'm with the group that got 4,000 and we are following everything. The city may decide to end this program, but but it got questions because they're giving out, well, last year was 350,000. And to me, there was significant, one council member raised serious questions about this because these groups aren't necessarily based in Menlo Park. So that this could be done, it might take a little staff time, and somebody could independently just see the list and go to the vendor's website, or are they doing what they say, what they're supposed to do at the website, like post their officers, post certain things. But, kind of go through that and then make a recommendation to the council regarding the program. I think there was interest in modifying it considerably, if not outright considering ending it. So that's another one that I know there's council interest on that based on the meeting. Okay, idea 3, city contracts. So again, this is similar to the vendor payments. According to Ballotpedia, they should be there. And that would allow someone to, especially if you're familiar with the work, so many of us might happen to be in a position to know. You could think about, gee, are we getting the services or not? Or are we paying for services we might get for free? And I will say right now, there's a lot of money from philanthropy going into quote disadvantaged areas, which would be Bellhaven, East Palo Alto, North Fair Oaks. And some of these groups may be doing the work that we're paying for. Just like that fire district contract that was lapsed, what few services we received were given free to East Palo Alto and Atherton. And again, this went on for several years, the discussion. Okay, here's some other ideas. I don't think these are, but they're possible. Review all other Menlo Park grant programs to make recommendations. I know of two more. One would be a developer agreement report to the city council. So these are bringing a considerable amount of money and they're going to sunset. And for example, the new community center, I heard Justin Murphy, our city manager, don't quote me on the figure, but some form of, we can give you $1 million and some change to help pay for staffing there out of a developer agreement. But one day those will end. And I have to ask, because I know of no report that's ever come before the council on that. And that the documents are very dense. The few that I've read, 50 pages, you're kind of looking, it's not just money often, it's other things. But I think it could be helpful to know when are these going to sunset just for financial planning. But that would represent a considerable amount of work just based on what I know of the topic. Okay, city hosted community events, maybe review the list to identify collaboration partnership opportunities. This, to save money, and this topic was brought up as a concern at one of the council meetings, which had to do with what kind of events are we inclusive, et cetera. So I just listed here, but I wouldn't recommend that as a top priority. Okay, page 5. Gift acceptance and building naming policy. To my knowledge, we don't have either. Many years ago, there was a big controversy over a wealthy individual offering money to build a new main library, and that caused all kinds of, and I still don't think we have a gift acceptance policy. And more recently, there was controversy over the naming of the new community center. It seems like that would cut down on staff time, council time, if there was something. Okay, grant acceptance policy is considered a best practice. And there is that possibility of grant-related deobligation. If we get grants and we're not performing, it's not that uncommon to be in a position where you have to give the grant back. Okay, and I actually I don't go into details, but so to me, to start that to help, because the city now has all these plans, do we have staff for all the plans? And is it possible some volunteers could help? And I know there's interest in that from the Environmental Quality Commission. So that kind of came up at their last meeting. I heard it. It's just possible that qualified volunteers, I'm not talking about just anybody, but that oversight could possibly help prevent problems. Okay, volunteer labor, city volunteer baseline report. And I think there is some interest in increasing volunteers with some, the Environmental Quality Commission, and we have a new emergency preparedness coordinator. I think he's interested in that. And then a community-based groups active in Menlo Park. So this, or who are working in here, they could be based elsewhere, but they're doing work here. Just having a list of them could be an opportunity to, expand their services, get more people involved. Again, we're saving staff time, which could spring them up for other things. Okay, so on the very back page, here's some references. I led with this grand jury report. They issued it within the week. And I think that's quite useful. So here are some ideas for discussion. Now, what do you all think?
So I'll add, there were three areas. I looked at 8 or 9 categories or opportunities for increasing revenue without increasing taxes. And it's down to about 3 now. And one of them is piggybacking on Lynn's idea around the gift acceptance policy. One of the things, and I forgot the numbers that I ran this when I first started, the number of households with a net worth of more than $100 million in Menlo Park is like 123. And so it opens up a significant opportunity if there was a volunteer committee that go out and solicit funds for various projects outside of taxes. So if high net worth individuals wanted to contribute, but it would also lend itself well to neighborhood initiatives. So for example, I live on O'Connor Street in Willows. And so, everybody in the neighborhood is, mostly all very tight, and everybody would chip in a few $100 to put in more stop signs. That type of initiative. And so city council, would approve the process. We had already raised funds that might actually smooth things out and get things done more quickly, especially if people were prepared to contribute above and beyond the tax base. And it doesn't create yet another recurring tax base that people want to spend. It's okay, it's a one-off item. So that was one of the elements was, how do we handle gift giving and then somehow organize around that community-wise, neighborhood-wise, and, special projects-wise. The other 2 areas that I looked at was in my neighborhood in Willows, there's a number of vacant homes. And a couple of them are pretty run down. And there's one in particular at 423 O'Connor, for example, where we've had a problem with squatters and the owner bought the property for $800,000 back in 2008. It's now worth around $3 million, but the tax base on that is $800,000. He had development plans approved in 2017, and those have never been acted upon. And there's been probably 24 police responses to incidents at that abandoned property. Squatters set a fire, two-alarm fire 2 years ago. So an enormous draw on city services. But one of the challenges I'm having is how do I actually identify which households are empty, not necessarily abandoned and decrepit like this one in my neighborhood, but how many of them are empty? How many of them have development plans? And is that lost revenue where, okay, you have a development plan, but if you're sitting on it for 7 years, then the city's going to come in and assess and say, look, this property actually at market value, once you do your renovations and improvements, is now worth $3.5 million. Your tax base is no longer $800,000. You've been given a 2-year or 3-year grace. How many of those properties actually exist in Menlo Park? And I've struggled to actually find data on that. And then the other piece that I was struggling with the website on was what are the total assets that the city of Menlo Park owns or manages? What's all the land? What are all the buildings? And how is that being monetized? And is that being monetized at fair market value? So I'll pick a made up example. City might own some property or a building and they're leasing it out at $1 a year. Well, there may be political reasons for doing that, but we should at least know from a transparency perspective, what are all those assets? How are they being monetized? And is it being done to market rates? And that goes back to the whole issue of financial performance benchmarks and all those other sorts of things. So it's really those 3 areas. And I'm struggling a little bit on the research of it, but I'm getting closer. And I actually will have some questions. And I'm not sure who I should be emailing within the city about whether or not there's actually information about empty properties that are privately owned that have been left and not developed, especially given the initiative that the city has to have more living space and units available for people to live in. So those were some of the additional pieces that we still haven't addressed.
Yeah, so I would say it would be helpful to have, do you want to meet with the subcommittees? I did ask Adrian if he wanted to meet with us before this, so I could have gone over this memo and, kind of, or, the 2 of us. So I understand Rachel Launder meets with the EQC subcommittee, but it could be because they're so active. But I would also like to go back to these ideas too, before we end tonight, to get feedback, including from staff in terms, of course, from staff, because we want to work in partnership with you. And the colleagues in terms of these, what would be considered the most helpful?
Excuse me.
You have to go? Oh, okay. So maybe we could, because here are some specific ideas and I would like.
I guess I'll respond or ask a question on
Yes,
one
please.
again, just the point of like having a dead link and sort of. It was live at some point, is it, what, is there any, I just be curious, is there any? Why was it shut off or?
Lynn, I'm sorry, Commissioner Lynn had mentioned, the dead link previously. I did try to do some digging. I believe the link, was one that went dead when the website, the new website was launched. So, it was on one platform, software platform, and a new website was developed and launched, led by our public information office. And I think that's when the initial disconnect may have occurred. We are the finance team that would be producing such a report, and that we would have to determine a workflow. We are not aware of a workflow that works with OpenGov to feed into that system. So we don't have that background knowledge of how those the city's checkbook, if you will, was produced. Because we have had turnover with COVID and such. And so this would require more research and development to pull data from one source and put it into there. It probably would be a page on the OpenGov transparency portal that would link to. So I'm not sure how it was done previously, but we would have to work with our OpenGov vendor to pull that data into a report and then link to it is likely what would happen. But we don't have that module in OpenGov in place that I am aware of.
Well, it sounds like it would take a lot of additional staff time, and yet it is on the ballot PDS recommendations. To have it there. Internal controls, I would suggest we all read the grand jury report, for more background. Well, we could not do anything without it being there. But, there is at least one case where oversight was helpful. But what about the other ideas? I mean, what would, because, yeah, you kind of heard my narrative. So what do you think?
I have two questions. On OpenGov, there is a line for donations, right? So does the city have any policy, or are those contractual, or where are the donations going from?
I believe this year we had donations from a memorial trust and the Friends of the Library and maybe one other group that had designated funds to contribute to the opening of Belhaven Community Campus. So that was I believe that went to the city council previously to accept those donations.
Okay. And when it comes to seeking out donations or grants, does the city have basically a centralized department that advocates for that, or is it put out to the departments, let's say, whether they're, the planning commission, construction, to go look for, a grant that's applicable in their area?
Mm-hmm. Each department has subject matter experts that might work with a centralized, generally a management analyst type person would be the one helping to write and submit a grant proposal. We do also have contract assistance from California consulting. Grant consulting, I believe is the name, to help. Some grants are extremely complicated, and so you want that outside expertise to help meet the deadlines and put together a compelling application. Some grants are kind of guaranteed to the city as long as we apply. One example of that is for in solid waste for the SB 1383 composting requirement. The city submits a grant application to CalRecycle, and as long as you meet that requirement, you're guaranteed some amount of. So it really varies depending on the department. Public Works by far has the most grants that they seek out because we have the physical infrastructure, and something like safe streets is something that all cities always compete for that type of grant funding. So it varies widely.
And
The other question about solicitation for actual donations from individuals or others, the only department that I've seen actually do that is the police department. So, but I don't know, other than my experience, exposure to the police department.
And just back to grants, we do have an agenda item to go through an update of our grant funding. So you'll get a sense of the types of grants that are currently in place.
The private organization that actually does the grant work came and presented to us a few months back. They were actually quite impressive.
But do we have a grant acceptance policy and a gift acceptance policy? Because if not, I mean, based on comparative research, the subcommittee could come up with some proposals. Because, I think these are considered best practices. So I think we both want to be useful. We want to work on things that will help collectively, do the research, move it forward. We could meet with the staff ahead of time. But, what would be helpful to you?
Yes, certainly staff could look into if we have those policies and get back to the subcommittee and meet with you to discuss that further. I don't know off the top of my head. Some grants do come with the requirement of bringing a resolution to the city council to be able to accept the grant. So in those cases, those to the city council, generally, those are grants that have a local match requirement. So we'll give you $1 million, but you need to commit the city to paying $100,000 to help the project. So the city has skin in the game, if you will. And so the city council is the body that appropriates funds. And so that's why that would go to them.
So, Lynn, first of all, Lynn and Jeff, thank you for the report. Lots of information, lots of research, really useful. I think for me, what could be really helpful is because there are a number of ideas, just in your view, kind of how you would prioritize these things, because there's different things going on. Idea one seems to almost be low-hanging fruit. It's really just figuring out how to get a link live again. And that's something that, the staff could completely deal with internally as long as we kind of provide that feedback. And some of the other things seem to be broader. So just in your view, if you had to prioritize those things, which would you think is sort of from a time perspective, resource perspective, something we could have some quick wins on?
Well, I think based on hearing the discussion, a review of the community grants funding program would it be of strong interest to the council. And it is something that I've kind of been following for a few years. I mean, watching the discussion and kind of looking through. So I could work with that. I know certain deliverables are due. I would start with what I can find out without involving the staff and then talk with the two of you, maybe would be the best thing. Because I have the list of all the organizations that got a grant. I can take the policy and go, yes, certain things are supposed to be at a website. You know, you can, and then, you know, some things, if they submitted their follow-up or not, that's a different matter. But at that point, I could then go to the staff and maybe selectively look at a few. So I think that one to me would be probably the most valued. It could be a cost saving of this amount of money per year, or maybe in a modified form. So that's my initial thought. What do you think? You look kind of, are you kind of shocked by all this, or what is?
I think that this item, which the way I'm interpreting what you're saying is kind of an audit by the Finance and Audit Commission of the Community Grants Funding Program, is how I'm hearing it, that you would select recipients and you would be looking at their financials. Is that?
No, that isn't at all what I intend. So just in short, like, let's just say 20 groups, 20 or 30 requested money, and they range from groups like the one I'm with, which is, you know, all volunteer based, on up to big organizations like Samaritan House. And getting the money is supposed to be a certain portion of your overall budget, you know, like 20% or less. And the policy is you're supposed to have certain things at the organization's website. And I don't remember exactly what they are, but the grant program itself, it raised questions as to how much does this really benefit residents in Menlo Park? That was some of the questions, and there could be other questions raised about it. But what I'm talking about initially is taking that list, and someone could very easily go through, because all organizations, if you're a nonprofit, you're posting a 990 for the IRS. You could do a superficial or secondary research, or, you know, your secondary sources, you're not talking with anyone. Just kind of go through, and that should form ideas for possibly modifying the program. You know, are they doing what they said they would? Does this really make sense? So I'm talking about kind of a base level initial review, not an audit of the program. But I think there was very apparent, strong council interest in ending the program. I mean, I heard the meetings. I was there to plug for receiving one for the organization I'm with. And one of the council members said, basically, I think this program ought to be ended. I've had questions about it for years. And then others kind of seem to feel the same way. So I, you know, this is taxpayers' money. It was brought up, and, you know, I think I'm in a good, I could look into that. So, but there are others, you know, I can do maybe one or two of these, but.
If I may.
Yes, please.
I think that this item is substantially. It's substantially different than the heading of the work plan of the review alternative revenue sources. It might be a good item to put on the proposed work plan to bring to council in September for the city council to approve this item as a standalone work plan item is
Okay.
I think that might be the way to go for that one, to get council direction specifically to have the Finance and Audit Commission review that program, because right now I believe that the city council is planning to review that on their agenda. And so I think we would look to see if they wanted to delegate that review and have the FAC look at it first.
Okay, what about the other items? Is there anything, like even our grant acceptance? Yeah, is there anything else here that? I know the developer agreements, I do believe that would be a very important report, but that would take more time than I could work on alone.
So I think
Yes.
there is a lot of material in the report, which is why I was trying to figure out, you know, how we might be able to scope it more narrowly. And I think I might propose this, and that is we take up time in another upcoming meeting, be it a special meeting, to really kind of get into the details. I'm just worried that we're not going to be able to go through all 5 ideas
Okay.
with questions to the staff, and I know you do have some questions, so maybe before that meeting, if we could get some answers to those, that might give us as a fact, just more clarity on what things are actually feasible, what's not, because I'm not sure we're really going to be able to reach any conclusions or sort of decisions this evening. Do you think that works, Lynn? That we separately find
I
time
think,
for it?
having a separate session,
Okay,
whether it's a subcommittee session with members of the city staff or full committee. Fine either way, both those would work for them.
But I do think one thing that came out of this paper is really idea one, and that exchange you had with Brittany, it does seem like something that we could figure out, and if it's going to be a major cost for the city to somehow purchase a new module, revamp the whole website, then that would also be good information for us, because it's always in many ways a cost benefit assessment. Yeah.
So
okay.
we need a motion to be able to have that meeting.
Could we, I mean, I could send an email and we could maybe set that up.
Do we need the whole commission or should we just work with the subcommittee?
And Lynn, I defer to you, but my initial reaction is it would be helpful for the subcommittee to meet with the staff, at least to get that list of questions answered. And then to the extent the subcommittee does propose a specific idea for us to move forward with an action and take to city council, then we do that as a collective.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think in general, it would be helpful if the staff met, if the subcommittee was proposing, some kind of substantial assortment of ideas to talk it over first.
I agree.
What about the
Yeah, Teresa.
contracts though? Because that also was a Ballotpedia suggestion to have the contracts there.
I think as staff, we're happy to meet with the subcommittee and
Okay.
review the full document,
Okay.
along with any questions. I'm not sure I have more substance to add at this
Okay,
time.
okay. So we arrange a meeting outside of the other formal meetings, okay.
Do we do that through you, Carol? Or do
No, we
just-
do
it. We have our-
Directly?
Yeah, and coming out of that meeting, we all want to meet as a finance audit commission. I'm definitely happy to liaise with Adrian to get that meeting on the calendar. All right, I think that item was really a report out by Lynn and Jeff, so thank you very much. Thank you, Lynn.
We have other ideas too that Jeff didn't talk about for the other. Working on it, right?
All right, so moving on to agenda item G, which is informational items. Under informational items, the city staff provides updates on matters of importance to the commission. Information items are not action items. However, a commissioner, a city staff member, or a member of the public may request to make a comment or ask a question on any of the informational items. And the informational item we have on the agenda is a quarterly update on city grant funding. And can I introduce management analyst Adrian Patino to introduce the item?
Right, thank you. So after this commission previously met with the city's contract grant writer, they expressed an interest to staff to see quarterly updates as it relates to the city's grant funding. So that is the table that we've attached to the agenda here is item G1, which summarizes the city's grant awards, as well as a couple of pending applications at the bottom of the table. It lists what the awarded or what the grants project focuses are, the lead department for each of those projects or initiatives, as well as the amount of these grants and the funding source. So this is a summary which we put together as part of the annual budgeting process in June for the city council's information and consideration, and we've kind of carried that forward here and updated it with a couple of pending grants from the general administration, specifically sustainability division at the very bottom two rows of the attachment. So those two pending grants are related to electrification from Peninsula Clean Energy. And then there is another one from the U.S. Department of Transportation, which is specific to charging and fueling infrastructure.
So these dollars are basically total amount over multi-year, right?
Yes, so grants, they have, each of them is different in what the requirements are and how that money is dispersed. Some may require matching funds from the city, as Brittany previously mentioned. And these often span multiple years and often come with specific requirements or checkpoints that the city must reach or provide different pieces of either like reporting or other kind of requirements to satisfy the requirements to receive all of those grant funding.
In the current year, what percent of the city's revenue is coming from grants?
We can look that up on OpenGov.
Just curious.
As a general practice, the city typically sets up special revenue funds to track each of the grant awards that it receives. So that they don't commingle with operational funds and other kind of day-to-day operations of the general fund, which is the city's largest fund and is kind of like the primary focus of the yearly budgeting process. So that does also kind of help to provide transparency and a bit more easy tracking of some of these grant awards.
1 second, and 1
Are
second.
you looking at 24, 25? Or 23, 24? Because we just.
Side question, on OpenGov, there's like $75 million in the project control account this year. What is it? Because it's a $75 million expense that goes to zero in the out years.
We could answer that, though that's not.
Probably called the CIP placeholders and carryovers. Most likely, I think that's the one you're referring to.
So it's just a placeholder.
So each of the CIP projects gets a control account assigned, which basically is just a bucket for that as it then gets spent out of the specific projects. That's gets allocated to the right areas that it's being spent out of. If I think I'm understanding what the account you're asking about. So that would eventually go to zero as those funds are assigned to specific items in the project. So example, they decided to do, I don't know, I can't even think of the project right now. It was in the CIP. They decided to build a new well, and so they needed to drill for a new well. So they say, okay, we're going to need, $5 million for the well. That goes in the project control account, but then as they go, okay, now we're going to evaluate, we're going to spend to a contractor, so we're going to move that and spend that out of contract services. We're going to spend this one out of whatever it is, and they move the budget around in that. So that's just I don't want to say a bucket of money to be used for
It's
that.
a holding
project.
account.
It's a holding account that says here's where the budget lives for that particular project, and as they identify specific needs and uses, it gets moved to the correct area.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think the bigger question is like if you go into OpenGov, it says we're gonna, excess, what is it? Revenue less expense is negative 63 million or something this year. And then it goes to negative 33 next year. And that
On
project,
the CIP projects.
no, just in total, like the front page of the OpenGov. And so I guess the question's like, is something loaded in the current year that is overstating the expense? Or are we missing something in the subsequent years? I don't need an answer. We can take it offline. Just curious.
You make me want to go to open.
Yeah,
and look
maybe-
more detail.
Maybe I need to.
Carol did a good job. Yes.
Very good onboarding.
I think I need to know where you're going first so that
Yeah.
I can fully answer that question correctly.
Yeah, and
No,
then
I don't have an answer right now because
that's fine. We'll take it offline.
you say OpenGov and I go, okay, which OpenGov site and which link are you clicking on? You click on the budget, are you clicking on the portal, are you putting on the right fiscal
Yeah.
year? So I have a lot of questions to ask
Perfect.
before I can answer that question.
Okay.
I want to pass on a compliment that I've been overdue about giving. So I was at the May California Emergency Services Association Annual Conference, and there was a session on grants, and the people were formerly with FEMA, now consulting firm, and I actually took screenshots I had yet to forward of a nice slide that complimented Menlo Park. So I told the woman where I was from, and she got all excited. And she, oh, Menlo Park, they're fantastic to work with, et cetera, et cetera. So I took notes. I have the screenshot. I promise I want to get it to you all with the CC to Justin, et cetera. But it was a very nice compliment. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I will pass it on to
No,
Public
I'll,
Works.
I would have
Yes,
passed it.
yes, please.
Oh, yeah, and then you'll pass it on to them. Too.
Yes.
Okay.
And in response to your question on the percentage of grants for the city, it looks like grants are about 4.5% of total revenues, just in general.
So these are informational items back to the grant piece that says, you know, here's, this sort of came in from a request in past meetings and wanted to just see this.
Yeah.
Because we saw
So
some.
we were saying, sorry, the middle, streets project, I have to know because of where it, you know. But if I didn't know what the Chrysler pump station is, that'd be, would I go to, again, OpenGov to like dive into that and it'd be an easy way for me to tie it, is that?
There's more information, each year prior to the budget being adopted, the city council holds a capital improvement plan study session. So often details of various projects come up at that session, and then the attachments, are large tables that have kind of a summary of the different projects. Many of those projects overlap with our grants. Not all, but many.
I thought we saw a slide that showed it was more, almost as much as the city's budget, that was over time.
The grants you have here that have been awarded, thanks to the Safer Bay grant, which is $50 million. It totaled up to about 80 million, which our general fund, is about that size. And so that's why the commission requested to get more details on what grants make up that 80 million. And so we're providing this as an informational item every quarter, which the commission can choose to discuss or, not have any questions about. So just.
Right. Any further questions on this informational item? Okay. Adrian, do we have any public comment?
If you would like to comment on agenda item G1, quarterly update on city grant funding, please press the raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen. If you're dialing in from a cell phone or from a landline, please press *9. And if you're in person, please complete a speaker card and return to me. Final call for public comment on item G1. And seeing no request for public comment.
Great. And now we move to the last item, which is adjournment of the meeting. So want to welcome again. I didn't properly welcome our new PAC members, so welcome. Thank you. And and thank you again to Lynn and Jeff for the readout. And I look forward to Matt chairing the next meeting.
Yes, thank you for sharing.
Thank you.